If you are a fan of architecture or simply like tall buildings, it's very likely that you believe you have the answer to the video title's question. And initially, I won't tell you that you're wrong, but perhaps it's not as straightforward as saying the tallest one is the One World Trade Center, which is exactly what you had in mind, right? And yes, indeed, that's also what the Council for Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat thinks. But that's their criterion, and it's not based on a natural law or an axiom. It's simply a possible categorization criterion, but not the only one, and according to my criterion, not even the most accurate one, and I'll explain why now. Let's start by accepting that there's no semantic debate regarding the definition of a building, as although you can always stretch that definition in general terms, it's commonly accepted to be a more or less permanent construction, fixed to the ground, with a roof, and intended to house humans or their activities. Therefore, when we talk about buildings and not structures, we are referring to something relatively concrete, especially when it comes to skyscrapers. Where things are likely less clear is when we talk about their spires, and this is a crucial matter because here semantics do play a decisive role in establishing official classifications, let's call them, at least in the sense that they will be used for informational and general purposes. The CTBUH itself, despite putting a lot of effort into clarifying its rules, and even though it seems essential, has not devoted a single sentence to clarifying what it considers a spire and why it has included the highest point of the building, including spires, in its primary criterion. But I won't get into this matter because it would be cumbersome, and I've already made some mention of it in the video about the tallest buildings in the world since 1900. And no, in case anyone is wondering, for the CTBUH, establishing what element will count as part of the building's structure has nothing to do with whether it was included in the initial architectural project, because the council does consider the possible renovation of the building when updating their classifications. However, what it does consider is whether the element is detachable or not, and here it does specify antennas as elements that won't be taken into account. But these kinds of stipulations without proper clarification or distinctions don't seem very consistent because with more or less difficulty, everything is detachable in a building. In any case, as I've mentioned, and this is what matters, they reserve the criterion of what is considered a spire for themselves. And that's why what you see here, which currently serves as an antenna, because that's what it is, for the CTBUH, is considered a spire. And this other one, which also serves as an antenna because it is not a spire for them. And here, I do think they are right, because indeed it's not, just like the One World Trade Center spire is not. But I don't want what I'm saying to seem like a criticism of the criterion itself, but rather how it's applied. Although I will say this, I believe the primary criterion for determining a building's height should be its highest covered and accessible floor for general purposes, with a surface area not less than 50% of the average of the rest of the building's floors and not dedicated to machinery or maintenance, or in other words, any floor used for residential, office, hotel, observatory, or restaurant purposes. And as such, this would be the height of the One World Trade Center. This is the height of the Sears Tower or Willis Tower, so nobody gets upset. And this is the Central Park Tower's height. Therefore, for me, the tallest building in America is undoubtedly the Central Park Tower, because we're talking about height, not importance, presence, or any other attributes we might want to emphasize in a structure. Because if we talk about that, in New York City, there will soon be a true architectural icon. But going back to what concerns us, I can't help but understand that the height of a skyscraper is fundamentally a visual matter, a perception, and most of the time something much more aesthetic than practical. Therefore, even though it doesn't align with my preference, I can comprehend that the maximum height of spires or parapets has been chosen as the main criterion, even if they are just a hollow shell, like, for example, the almost 800 feet spire of the Burj Khalifa. And I'm talking, of course, about spires or parapets, or any structural addition that does provide that sense of continuity, solidity, consistency, architectural coherence, something that certainly those economical masts or handy antennas, which have been considered spires in some cases and not in others, do not offer. They have become quite common in falsifying the real height of constructions. This has been done in the case of the One World Trade Center, but has reached absurd extremes in the case of the Merdeka 118 in Kuala Lumpur, or, on a smaller scale, in the Varso Tower in Poland. But to visually illustrate how different these additions are from an antenna or mast, and to conclude, let's see how the One World Trade Center would have looked with a parapet, instead of with that it has. What do you think? We conclude with this, but keep in mind that up to this point, you have been able to know my opinion and that of the CTBUH, and neither of the two has to be the most valid, and certainly not the only ones possible. That's why I ask you, what's yours? I'll be reading your comments. See you soon.